Ahoy there! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes. Now in today's video we're going to be going over the second half of last week's developer AMA on the official EVE Echoes Discord. This was originally supposed to be about balance and stability of the servers, but the developers did end up answering a lot of other questions that the community was obviously very keen to have understand. If you haven't watched part 1 already, I will put a link in the description down below and I'll try and put a card on screen now. It's recommended you go through that because I will be basing most of the thoughts and opinions I give throughout this on what has been already said in part 1. Basically there were 60 odd questions, so I did the first 30 in the first video. I'm going to be just jumping straight on now and going through the second 30, giving sort of brief thoughts and opinions, but mainly this is meant to be sort of a, this is just what the developers said. If you're interested in sort of a full thoughts and opinions piece, I will round all of this together and do kind of a highlights, so let me know in the comment section down below. Anyway, jumping right in, Monk asked, it seems my original question got nuked as I tried to add in a link. Can we get character transfers implemented, please? This is the concept of paying for a character to be transferred from one account to another. So if, for example, you started off with EVE Echoes having 3 separate accounts for 9 different alts, for example, but now you only really use 2 or 3 of those, rather than having to log into different accounts, you could just pay to have them all transferred to the main account and things like that. Lonsdot says, we're also willing to add similar features, however there is currently some resistance to building similar platforms, especially overseas, so it's impossible to promise that this feature will be available in the future, but when conditions permit, we will advance this feature. So you might get the ability to transfer characters between accounts later on. I do feel this does open things up to selling accounts, which is a bit of an iffy grey area, but that's a topic for a different video, I think. So if you're looking for the ability to transfer characters between accounts, it looks like that may eventually be coming. Will there be new anomaly content, like including dreads in dead spaces? Melos says it'll not be exactly anomaly content, but some new PvE content for sure. Now, I've said this before, I don't think that dreads should be in dead spaces. I was really happy, actually, when they announced that dreadnoughts would be in their own unique anomaly, and so I'm pretty happy with that. I think things like Abyssal Dead Space, which we talked about in this week's Dev Q&A, could be really interesting. That's not exactly anomaly content, that's a different kind of setup, as we discussed, so who knows, maybe that could be what they're talking about in future, but they're saying new PvE content is on the way at some point. 1v1 arena with custom fit ships, please. Melos here then confirms a 3v3 arena with custom fit is under development. This is something a lot of people have been asking for a long time, pretty much before even Faction Wargames was announced. One of the disappointments, in inverted commas, for some people for Faction Wargames was the fact that you couldn't modify the fit yourself. Now, I kind of get where the devs were coming from for this. It's easier to balance Faction Wargames if you yourself, as the developers, are setting the fits. Whereas, obviously, if anyone can bring anything, it becomes a bit more chaotic. But in fairness, that is what some players want. They want to jump in with a pre-made team of 3 players, all with their own unique ships and specialised fits, and then they're going to be thrown up against another team of 3 players with random fits as well, you know, what they've gone for. I think that's pretty cool and pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing that one eventually added. What's the current development over stable, large-scale battles, and why can the Chinese server handle battles better, was the full comment. Now, they've talked about this at length in the first video, the first half of this AMA, that actually the Chinese server is not particularly more stable than any other, just obviously everyone's in the same region, which does help with latency and sort of code transfer on stuff. But they confirmed that actually what happened here was they got the alert whilst they were in the office that this big battle was happening, that the server was getting overloaded, so they were able to manually switch on time dilation, which is one of the big things that they had there. One of the big problems they've said is that ultimately time dilation doesn't automatically switch on properly at the moment. That's what they've been running tests to try and get fixed. The battle just luckily happened when every developer's in office and we noticed the server load changed and manually turned on tie-dye. That's it. They are doing work to get that stability underway. They've been doing a lot of testing and it looks like we are getting that actually added and going live soon. So, exciting times there. Can we name our ships in ship hangars for better organisation? This to me is a big thing. I've got like 5 probe covert ops sitting around, all with different fits. I've got numerous different like Condor 2 interceptors that use different fits, and it does suck jumping into a ship, going, oh no, didn't mean that one, and you have to swap to the next one, wait for it to load, and go, oh no, must be the third one, and swap into that. Silent Rose as a character exists purely because I wanted to have my Hurricane called Silent Rose from EVE Online, but being unable to name ships, I had to name the character that instead. So chances are that when that happens, I'll rename Silent Rose, the character, and just rename the ship to actually being Silent Rose. It's great for organisation, it's also great for sort of roleplay, although do expect a load of really childish names to pop up, because that's always the case when you give players the ability to name things like this. But hey, considering how I talked about the Thorax and all of that, and the Armageddon in my 5 best and 5 worst ship design video, let's be fair, I'm no better. Nerf Scepters, buff destroyers, known issue, into the to-do of next balancing. I have been hammering the devs about this at length. Both Lancedot and Melos have probably had enough of Captain Benzie messaging them, but we have had some really interesting conversations about why we think interceptors are too powerful, what we think destroyers' roles should actually be. It's not just a case of make destroyers be better. You've got to figure out what role you actually want them to fulfill, and therefore how you do that in a way that doesn't just make other things obsolete. If you nerfed interceptors into the ground in every way, shape and form, then made them purely tackle frigates, they're going to have no use. And a lot of people who are skilled purely into interceptors are going to be like really miffed that their playstyle has completely disappeared. Because let's be fair, if you're flying a Condor 2 interceptor, for example, at the moment, and that's doing PvE and PvP content for you, and then they just completely remove all of its abilities, what's your alternative right now? What other frigate are you going to fly? A Breacher Assault at Tech 7? There's nothing else comparable, so you can't just nerf everything into the ground without accepting that other things do need to be tweaked and improved elsewhere. Same with destroyers. You can't just make destroyers god tier all of a sudden. Not everyone's going to jump into them, and you kind of EVE as a thing, EVE and meta. You've got to be very careful in EVE to try not to create a meta. If you create a meta, then people start chasing that meta, and then the problem compounds. Because when you try to fix that meta, suddenly you are changing everyone's most used ship. And that's not a fun feeling. It's never nice to wake up and go, oh, my ship's been nerfed, even if in your heart you know that it needed those nerfs. So it's one of those tricky situations. Once a meta starts forming, it hurts to get out of, but sometimes you just got to rip the band-aid off. When can we play EE on Mac M1? So many players are waiting for this. Very sorry, says Lancedot. According to the agreement, we currently will not have any technical investment in running on PCs and Macs. At the same time, we will not provide technical support for running our game on the emulator. And to me, this is the right answer. I know you can say so many players are waiting for this, but let's be completely honest. How many people are playing EVE Echoes right now? And what percentage of them have a Mac M1? How many? It's a minuscule amount. And even for the ones who have it, how many are actually going to be using it? Like, for example, my laptop can play Infinite Lagrange. I've got Infinite Lagrange installed on my laptop. Am I playing it on my laptop? No, because it's so much easier just to grab my phone and turn it on. Ultimately, when you start bringing in emulators and Macs, you start making it easier to script in all kinds of bots and hacks and things like that. In addition, anyway, it's just another thing to have to take into consideration for development. If you look at how most of the PC Android emulators run, they are very resource heavy. Now, we're already having issues with stability in battles, to the point that we just had to add potato mode, as the developers are liking to refer to it. Which means that if you now add in you try and support all these emulators, suddenly you've got to bug fix and test for all of those as well, and it's just adding more devices that ultimately, yeah, I'm with them. I'm with them on this. I think not banning people from emulating is fine, but if people are going to emulate, they've got to expect that there are going to be bugs, and the devs aren't going to care about that. If you want to play on emulator, that's fine, but don't expect us to, prioritize it in any way, shape, or form. If you come to us and go, oh, there's game-breaking bugs happening on my emulator, they're going to shrug and go, play it on your phone, which I agree with. What is the development team's approach to tech level currently? Many higher tech level ships are just a buffed lower tech version. This was again answered in the dev Q&A. There is a link to that in the description down below as well, where they talk about the ultimate aim is to have every ship have a tech level 9 or 10 equivalent. So if you've got a ship that you want to be flying but it's just not represented at a high tech level. Eventually it should be. They talked about this being sort of the rule that they use in inverted commas is that when they add a new ship, it either needs to have a new below Tech 10, it either needs to have a new role or a new tonnage. So for example, the Rupture becoming the Rupture Guardian. The Rupture 2 Guardian should theoretically be a Tech 10 ship by that role, Tech 9, Tech 10 ship by that role. If you then want another Cannon Guardian, then that needs to be a new tonnage. So that became the Hurricane Guardian, and vice versa, things like this. But they have broken that rule. The fact that we've got a Tornado, Tornado 2, and Tornado 3 does prove that. Same with like the Bellicose Covert Ops, Bellicose 2 Covert Ops, and Bellicose 3 Covert Ops. Anytime there's a 3, it's where they've technically broken that rule. But hey, Melos says it was our old design to make higher tech ships just a better version of old tech ships, and I do think to make ships more specialised will bring new strategy and more fun. Some adjustment will be made to specialise the ships in the future. This is something that I have spoken to Melos at length about. The fact that, for example, using the Cyclone line of things, Tech 7 sees the Cyclone, then you get the Cyclone Guardian, the Cyclone Command, and the Cyclone 2 Command. And the Cyclone 2 Command is better than all of the other Cyclones, obviously except the Guardian, at everything it does. It's higher DPS than the standard combat Cyclones, and it's obviously better than the previous Cyclone Guardian, and that's before you even take into account the fact that if you add on the actual command bursts, it's going to be better. Sorry, I'm saying Guardian, I mean Command, Cyclone Command. Cyclone 2 Command is an insane battle cruiser, and ultimately, should it be more damaging than the standard Cyclone? No, I don't think it should. I think if you look at a Cyclone and a Cyclone Command, the Cyclone Command gets the command boosters, command buffs, you know what I'm trying to say here, wow, I cannot get my words out, command burst boosts. There we go, that's a tough thing to say. It gets those benefits, so that should come at the cost of something rather than just being a direct upgrade. So I kind of have been personally of the belief, and I know many of you guys watching this have supported me on that, that something like a Cyclone Command shouldn't be better than a Cyclone. There should be a payoff. The fact that you're getting the command burst modifiers should come at a payoff of things like DPS or tank or something, so that you actually have a meaningful decision about which ones to fly, and you don't just immediately lose the previous ship as soon as you tech level up and get access to a new one. This is why I really don't like, for example, the Oracle 2, and the Oracle 3, because the Oracle 2 is just better than the Oracle 1, and the Oracle 3 is just better than the Oracle 2. The only thing you can really say there is that, well, one of them's cheaper than the other, but it means one of them is always going to be completely obsolete. If you hit the Oracle 2, there's no reason to ever fly an Oracle 1. If once you reach the Oracle 3, there's still no reason to fly the Oracle 1, you're just going to fly the Oracle 2 as the cheap one. I don't know. So it's nice to see that they're taking this into consideration. We know from the dev Q&A they're going to be adding new Tech 10 ships, like a Tech 10 Hurricane, a Tech 10 Cyclone, not Command, not E-War, just a combat version of this. That is something we sorely need. Every ship type should be represented at Tech Level 10, but they're also talking about adding more specialised versions of ships, which I can only see as a good thing. I know because some reason Chinese server will have more pay-to-win event, so they will have more updates, but can we get good content and balance and all this kind of thing? Because of automatic translation, voice chat and other functions, third-party services are used. Ah yes, this was the question that was about us having auto-translate and the Chinese server having a voice chat system. One of these two suppliers only provides overseas services and the other only provides domestic services. So currently only the international server has automatic translation and only the Chinese server has voice chat, which in fairness kind of makes sense, and at least it's that way around. I can't imagine many people inside China are needing to speak languages other than Chinese to each other. You'd kind of assume that if it's a Chinese server, everyone is going to be speaking Chinese, so an auto-translate function isn't really necessary. Saying that if everyone is speaking the same language, then voice chat is inherently a useful thing to have. On the other hand, on the international server, the auto-translate has been one of the best things added since the game launched. Pity that it's locked behind Omega. We will get that changed eventually, I'm sure. But for voice chat's a little bit trickier, and I get that ultimately a lot of us outside of China are using Discord anyway. It would be nice to have it in-game, but it's not an urgent kind of thing. In the future, says Lance, if we find a suitable overseas supplier of voice chat, we'll also add voice chat function to the international server. It would be nice to have it in the game so that we don't need to use Discord for like fleet comms. You can just jump into the game, open up fleet comms in your fleet, and then add permissions and things there. That would be really cool. But for now, we have a workaround. So I kind of agree it's not an urgent thing right now. There are still many players who care about insurance issues. Thank you for your concern. At present, we have no plans to adjust the feedback from both combat players and industrial players. At the same time, monitoring data also shows that insurance can effectively reduce the chance of players leaving our game due to loss of ships. This is a key point. If you watched my video on fixing industry recently, this is exactly what I said. Insurance is there to stop players quitting the game. It's to get them back into the content and having fun. Ultimately, the point being made here is industrial players leaving, as horrid as this even, I hate saying this, the industrial players leaving has not damaged the game as much as the PvE players sticking around has helped it, if that makes sense. It's kind of being viewed as a necessary sacrifice, and I hate that. I suggested in that Fixing Industry video some very easy ways to help industry along, and I do think NetEase could just make some minor changes there. As long as it's not hurting that players leaving our game due to loss of ships reduction, then I think fixing insurance, tweaking insurance to give industry players a bit more incentive is a good thing, and I think you can really do that with just changing the amount that the buy orders actually pay. Anyway, regarding flagship insurance, because someone was saying it's ridiculously expensive, we still maintain the attitude of the official website. It may adjust its claim discount ratio and may disassemble the system purchase order for flagship components when generating a purchase order, but this is still undecided. And that I can kind of get behind there, that when a flagship, a capital ship, is destroyed, rather than just be, oh, you need to supply a new capital ship to the buy order, which is going to be very difficult for players to do, then actually having it take modules, putting up the actual components for a flagship would be a much better way of doing it, and industry players would be able to to mass produce capital ship components and not have to worry about the ridiculous amount of ISK it takes to turn the oven on to combine all of those components together into the capital. That's a really nice tweak. Landstar, if you're watching this, please implement that. That is a really nice little tweak that helps industry a lot. Are you watching CC content, says Achieved, and I did ask this myself as well. Melos says yes. And I'm super glad about this. It means that these videos where I feel like sometimes I'm just shouting into the void and saying, oh, I really hope they do this and I really hope they do that. They are paying attention to this. That's cool. It means if I can do more content like this, hopefully I can keep giving ideas to the developers. I will, of course, keep poking them in private messages. When can indie and miners expect to see the Orca and Porpoise in the game with relevant skins? Skin has been in the game for a long time. I covered this myself in the Porpoise Orca video. Not in the near future, says Melos, and that's fair enough. I get it. I want to see the Orca and Porpoise out there. I think miners would love to have these ships, and they are really cool ships, having the mining foreman links and stuff like that. Basically, command bursts, but for miners. But right now, mining needs to be fixed first. We need to get the baseline stable before we start adding more stuff, or it is going to be a continued race to the bottom. Again, if you disagree with me on that, please go watch my video on fixing industry. I explained that I don't hate miners. I want you guys to get these cool ships, but right now, adding those is going to do more damage to mining than good. When can we see corporation wallet divisions? It's a headache and pain to give every corp builder access to the yada yada. We planned a new hangar divide tool in next year as quality of life update. Wallet divisions are not on the plan, but it's worth to put it on the plan. So that's cool that they're still looking at quality of life changes and things for corporations and alliances, and actually, a key point to make here is that a lot of the stuff that they talk about here shows that they are committed for this year was all about new exciting content, pushing out updates, pushing out new ships, pushing out new content. Next year becomes much more focused on quality of life, stabilizing the game, balancing things out. Now that all this content's in place, we can start making it a little bit more stable and people can enjoy that and tweak it and so on. Jump gates when? Lowering the player's combat threshold is one of our main goals in 2022. To accomplish this goal, one of the most important points is to reduce the rush time before the battle. Bridge jumping is one of the mechanisms that can reduce the rush time, so it's in line with our development direction. But our final solution is not necessarily a bridge jump. It may also be other forms of equipment or construction. In addition, recently we've also completed a new way of movement to facilitate the player's movement in the universe. Please stay tuned. So first of all, jump gates. Jump gates are stargates that your alliance can build and put fuel in for ships to use. The bigger the ship, the more fuel is consumed out of the jump gate's fuel canisters. What it does is it will jump to another gate in another system, and that system may or may not even be the same alliance. This had some really interesting implications in EVE Online, where the gates were once connected, but now the alliance is not necessarily at war, but not necessarily friendly either. And you get these little alerts that are kind of, it's a one-way gate, you may not have permissions to jump back through it. And there's some really cool stuff that you can do with this. It allows you to connect up your own empire the way you want to, as long as you've got the fuel in order to fund it. It's a cool system, I really like it, and I'd love to see it in EVE Echoes. But they also, here at the bottom, they talk about they've completed a new way of movement to facilitate players' movement in the universe. Please stay tuned. This is the Yanjung engine that they talked about previously in a developer Q&A. I don't know what this is, and I hope it's not just a, oh, I want to jump to this system without sinusoidal fields and, you know, basically a jump drive but without the beacons. I'm a little worried about what the Yanjung engine might be, but obviously I need more information before I can pass judgment on it. Any plans to add Logi-specific role bonuses such as power grid reduction for remote boosters, repairers, or group boosters? No clear plan on that, but it will be an important part of our next ship specialization update. Again, we're talking about them doing more stuff for ship specializations. I'd like to see things like logistics nanocores making it into the game a lot more. I'd like to see actually some more skills here and there for different things as well, not just logistics. I still believe that we should have a covert ops cloaking skill that reduces the activation delay, the reactivation delay, maybe even reduces the penalty on your target time. Things like that. I think that adding more specialised bonuses and specialised skills is not a bad thing, as it forces meaningful decisions. Because if you are someone who is going to be using covert ops cloaks a lot, do you want to put all the skill points that it's going to cost into using this covert ops cloak, or are those skill points better used elsewhere in additional damage or faster movement or things like that? It adds meaningful build direction and choice. So more specific role bonuses, power grid reduction, things like that. I think really cool. More of that, please. Are there plans on adding solo content like abyssal dead spaces? They talked about this before. I talked about this actually as well in a recent Dev Q&A. It's the one that's linked in the descriptions where they talked about abyssal dead space. Interestingly enough, I disagree that abyssal dead spaces are actually necessary solo content. Yeah, some of the easier ones are, but the higher ones, the tech level 4 abyssal dead spaces, are definitely fleet-based content. But anyway, Melos says, we don't have plan for solo content. After all, this is an MMORPG, emphasis on the MM, massively multiplayer, but we have planned small gang 3 to 5 people PvE, which to me is a brilliant little way of doing it. There's plenty of content in the game for solo players right now. The game is designed to be played with friends and played with groups, so you don't need too much in the way of solo content. Or suddenly it becomes more profitable for people to do things on their own rather than teaming up. It should always be more profitable to team up than to go it alone. And that's more profitable overall, at least. So, like, for example, if you would earn 100 million ISK doing something on your own, then if 2 of you do it, then you would each earn 75 million ISK for a total of 150 million ISK. Stuff like that is what EVE is all about. It's about a group of players coming together to achieve things that any one of them could not do on their own. Will there be better utilities for POS, player-operated stations, outside of PI? No plans for the near future. So basically the Capsuleer outposts right now are still very much PI outposts with the ability to generate dead spaces. There's no plans for updating that in the near future. How soon will there be new ships? The faction Yanjung currently has only 2 training ships. Yeah, this is a point of consternation for me as well. A year and a half after the game launched, with one of its biggest sort of exciting things of, hey, we're going to be adding this whole new faction. Look at how cool their ships are. Look at these new weapons. They still haven't actually added them. Before introducing new factions, we will balance existing ships first. So, those are on the way, but not until we've balanced the rest, which I'm actually all for. Get balance done first before new content. But that said, I do want the Shunyue and the Kanyue battle cruiser. The actual real non-prototype versions of both those ships are so much fun. What is the plan for null NPC stations? We've seen how exploitable they are. This question, again, this basically comes from a whole group of players who have played EVE Online where there aren't null NPC stations per se, and they just want the same thing. I disagree with this. I think null NPC stations are fine. You've just got to actually put some effort into defending them. If you know that you're about to be attacked, maybe put some gate camps up around the NPC station. Like, maybe consider putting a fleet nearby. I don't know, there's all kinds of things here. Lancedot says, I did receive some feedback mentioning that the null space station would cause trouble for Sovereign Legion, so alliances. Since the number of these feedbacks is not particularly large, I really didn't spend a lot of time thinking about this matter seriously. But in fact, I have thought about it a little bit, so I can share my thoughts. If we prohibit pirate players from using these space stations, then Sovereign players will be very happy, but the living space of pirate players will be squeezed. Does this conform to the ecology of our game? If we allow these space stations to be occupied, do we need a 20v20 tournament environment that does not rely on numbers of people, so that the Sovereign army and the high and low security army can compete for its ownership? These are just some rather divergent ideas and no conclusion has been reached yet. If you're interested, you can also share your views on this issue. Basically, we want more feedback. We've had some interesting ideas about this, but we want more feedback. And I agree with this. If you're one of those people who likes to just go on solo roams, it sucks that you may have to jump 50 jumps to actually go out and get some PvP. Having an NPC station that you can dock up at does give you the advantage of having a staging point far away from home. That's true, and any large alliance should be able to handle that, in my opinion. That's why we have interdictors, for crying out loud. It's what, you are still at the home field advantage. Just because someone can, dock a couple of ships in your stations, which, by the way, you can stop them doing using interdictors, ultimately you can still then actually, fight back against that. You can prevent it, and you can fight back against it. You know it's always going to be a weak point, and that's coming from someone who has an NPC station right in the middle of their empire that was literally for 2 weeks occupied by an entire army of aggressors. We had to do everything in groups in Void because CJ6MT was occupied for so long. Did we complain about it? Did we ask the devs, please change the game so that we don't have to deal with this? No. We loved all that free PvP content being dropped on our doorstep, and eventually the defenders, the invaders, the guys who had come and laid siege to our citadel eventually got bored and disappeared. Anyway, what time can we get a kill mail API and jump gates? Jump gates we've already talked about. Jump gate has finished concept design, waiting to be implemented on good timing. So, hey, confirmation, jump gates coming to EVE Echoes. API not planned for upcoming updates. This is something that actually was talked about a lot with Tailless Fox. If you're interested in an API, if you yourself are an API dev, reach out to Tailless Fox. Offer some support, offer some advice, and see if we can't work together as a community and as the developers in order to get a functional API. As a friend of mine put in one of my comment sections, one of the things about API is that you don't want this to be a rush job, because then suddenly it finds out that someone has been able to use the API to watch local in every system in the game, so they know exactly all the information of who's where and when, and they are able to basically act like developers with all these tools that were never once intended. You do not want that in a game like this. Yes, we all want things like the kill mail APIs, but there are some big downsides to this, especially if it is not done carefully. It's not to say I don't want an API. I do. I think an API would be amazing. It's just got to be done very, very carefully so that it can't be exploited by a minority. Can we all move our accounts to Chinese server? We're tired of being beta testers. This really gets me, because do you honestly think that the developers essentially are using us as beta testers? There's no evidence for that. If anything, certain things have been rolled out on the Chinese test server before being rolled out onto our server. So if anything, the Chinese server's been the beta testers. Beyond that though, do you honestly think that the developers want to be having 2 versions of their game running? Because when a bug happens, it means they've got to constantly be sifting between the 2 and figuring out what's the difference. This is the same with Fulmination. The Fulmination content creator test server does not have anything on it that the standard Aurora test server does not. They are the exact same build version. The only difference is that if you're on Fulmination, you get access to the ability to use the create code and travel codes and things like that. So you can type in a code and just pull a file out of the game files, magic it into existence. There is nothing on Fulmination that doesn't exist on the game server. I just have the ability to actually pull it out. They're the same version. It's the same with the Chinese version. The exact same game. Because it's too much effort to have different versions running for different regions and have to try and flip between them and figure out where the errors are coming up and how that all works. Better to just have one bit of code that you roll out onto all the servers at the same time. Could you give more details on what you're going to do with mining? I believe you're focusing so much on PvE and PvP. Well, yes, there is ultimately a point that about 90% of the player base is PvE and PvP based. Most of the game in Eve Echoes is based around that. It's also where most of the money making comes in, so it is just a good decision for NetEase to focus on that. Does that mean that mining and industry should suffer? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a smart business decision, not that we should let mining suffer. Some loot and reward from PvE and PvP content will also need to be involved with manufacturing to get the final product. That's how industry people get benefits from new gameplay updates. And I see where they're coming from with this, that if you have it so that just new modules drop, then it's just PvE and PvP. But if it's blueprints that drop, then the industrial players suddenly get involved. And I think there's still fixes that we can do to industry. Again, go watch my fixing industry video. But I do think at least that's a good ethos going forward. That whenever they add something for PvE and PvP players, ask how can industry benefit from this as well. Do the Anjung ships be released in Chinese New Year next year? Please, we're all crying out. We just want to know when we get these ships. The Anjung ships will have some updates in the future, but will definitely ensure the consistency of the game content between the international server and Chinese server. This also helps us maintain the stability of the game. In the near future, the international servers and Chinese servers will definitely maintain a high degree of consistency in hardware, performance optimization, and game content, which of course makes absolute sense. As I said before, have one load of server code that you just roll out to everything at the same time. It means if there's a bug, everyone gets it, you get a lot of feedback instantly, you can fix it and roll it out across all servers. There are only some small differences in some activities that involve festivals and customs. This means there might be like weekend events in the Chinese server that don't exist in the global server, for example. Things like Chinese New Year are celebrated the world over. Things like Golden Week, not so much. Those are really only like observed in the East. And if you're asking yourself what's Golden Week, well, that's my point proven entirely. There are a lot of festivals that the West celebrates that like China doesn't, and vice versa. That will be the only difference going forward, that some small events will be just on the servers that it makes sense for. Are there plans of adding ship stimulation where you can simulate, I think this means, and auto-fit by buying in the market? This is a feature in EVE Online, the ship simulation tool, where you can basically like put stuff together on a theoretical ship. Kind of like you pull up the ship tree, you get the ship there, you can then drag and drop random modules and things in to get an idea of what its DPS will be like, what its survivability will be like, and see it like that. Sort of like a custom fitting tool, and then if you want to, you hit a buy all and you go to the market and it'll give you a shopping list and you can go through that. We finished the development of the ship simulation on the server end. The client end feature is queuing up in future schedules. Awesome. Ship simulation is really, really cool. That's something that means you can try out a fit and get an idea of what it's going to do without having to buy all of the pieces and transport it all together first. It just gives you a lot more control and sort of information about what you're going to do with a ship and a fit, and that's really exciting. For those of you who are interested, however, there is currently an app available called Sweet, SWEET. You can find it on iOS and Android, and I believe there are beta versions for PC, Windows, and Linux. I did a video on that as well. I'll add a link to that video in the description down below. Also, so you can try that out and put all your skills in, and you can simulate fits on that as well, which is pretty sweet. Can we add a check to invisible the pod kills in combat and corporation combat log? Yes, nice suggestion. I'll put it in the plan of our future quality of life updates now. Really useful thing there. Rather than having to sit there and scroll through all of your kill mails trying to find what you want, because who cares about the pod kills? Being able to actually have a toggle that hides those would be awesome. Will ammunition ever be added to the game? I asked. It would add build variety to combat pilots, and it gives industry pilots a guaranteed and dedicated new source of income. It was on the plan, but according to our recent evaluation, it's too early to release it recently. It will make balance become more difficult before we fix the current balance problem. And yeah, okay, I get that. I concede, I get that. That, yes, If you're trying to balance the ships now, we need to balance those before we add ammunition, because ammunition doesn't just, some people hear ammunition and think, oh great, this means my ship can run out of ammo. What ammo actually does is twofold. On one hand, it allows you to modify your ship's build. It means that you can add extra range at the cost of tracking, or extra damage at the cost of various different things. You can modify. If you've decided that actually, for example, you like your succubus, but you want to be able to do DPS from just outside web of fire range, you can do something that will reduce its tracking, maybe lower its damage slightly, but push it outside of that web range. There's cannon ammunition that you can actually change it from being explosive damage to electromagnetic. Things like this that just allow you to change what your ship is actually capable of doing. The second thing that it does is it really helps out new industrial players, because it is a guaranteed source of income. People always need ammo, which means if you are going to be able to mass produce cheap ammo, you can keep it on the market and it will always sell. This is one of the things I didn't mention in the fixing industry video, but ultimately is, in my eyes, one of the biggest fixes to industry we could ever have. Make it so that common ammo is either unnecessary or seeded by the game. So basically the status quo. The stuff that you're currently using, in my opinion, make it infinite. Make it so that if you run out of ammunition of all other types, you just go back to doing what you are currently doing at this point in the game, but you can then add in ammo that tweaks and changes it, and that is then consumable. That's how I would fix it, in my opinion. Because on one hand, I get that people don't want to be carrying around tons of extra ammo all of a sudden, and having to fill up cargo spaces and remembering to go and buy that and top it up, and running out of ammo in the middle of a combat mission sucks. Yeah, I get it. I get that part. So why don't we remove that by having basic ammo be infinite, and then all of the other ammo consumable, but ultimately specialized. Thank you for pointing out this problem, and thank you, friends who like below, for letting us notice this problem. I'm not sure what the question is, we'll get to that in a second. This is actually a question we've thought about before, although the construction cost of Eve Echoes, this is the whole thing of how ships are majorly towards ISK rather than towards ores and minerals. This comparison is a bit unfair to Eve Echoes because the two games are not exactly the same in terms of ISK output, recycling structure, and quantity. When considering whether it's possible to reduce the ISK required for manufacturing, we'll pay more attention to the impact of this part of ISK on the recovery of Eve Echoes output. The current conclusion is that if manufacturing costs are reduced, the recovery of ISK will enter an unhealthy inflationary stage, therefore we will not make adjustments directly. And they're right. If you just made it cheaper, that's going to cause inflation. On the other hand, if you make it cost less ISK but more ores to compensate, that really does help things out. It actually helps stabilize a lot. Also, recycling, reprocessing, that should output less minerals than it currently does, in my opinion. That would help stabilize as well. Thank you. One more question. More info on that 3v3 mode. This is the one of you can 3v3 with your own ship fits. It will be sub-capitals, 3v3 battles, and you can bring your own ship without losing it. You can join the battle from both stations and citadels. The battlefield will have a simple red zone mechanic to prevent endless kiting or running away strategy, more detail to be decided. So kind of like faction warfare complexes are in EVE Online and Abyssal Dead Spaces, there's a red ring around it that you can't fly out of. You start taking damage if you fly too far from the centre, basically, so you can't kite endlessly. But it does look like it's going to be sub-capitals, so everything from frigates to battleships. Hopefully they do like faction warfare complexes, ones where you lock it to different types. For example, in EVE Online you have Novice, which is frigates only. You have small faction warfare complexes where you can bring frigates or destroyers. You have mediums where you can bring in cruisers and battle cruisers, and you have larges where you can bring everything up to and including battleships. That adds a little bit of internal balancing as well. It means you kind of know what you're going up against, and you don't get a situation where it's 3 frigates up against 3 battleships, like 3 Typhoons. Anyway, why do some ships have 8 to 10 nanocores, for example the Cyclone, whereas other ships have no level 3 nanocore at all, for example the Hound? Because of the cost required to make nanocores, especially some nanocores with complex and unique appearance, like the Neon Rain, this cost will be quite high. Therefore, in the event, we can only select a part based on the utilization rate of ships and make nanocores for them. But in Concord Store, we will cover as many ships as possible. Basically, it's why would you make skins for stuff that very rarely gets used? You've got to spend time, energy, and effort designing something. Do you want to design it for stuff that people are actually going to buy, or do you want to, go for stuff that spend all that time and energy on stuff that's not going to be used? The Hound, for example, compared to the Cyclone, I dare say there are a lot more Cyclones out there than there are Hounds being flown. That said, I would love a Nanocore on my Hound. Stealth Bomber Wing is something I really, really want to sort of actually get up and running properly. I got really excited when they talked about bombs in the last half of the video. So getting Nanocores for them eventually, hell yeah. Just, I see why they go for certain ships designs before that. Otherwise though, there we have it. That is everything from this developer AMA. There is going to be another one on Friday. This Friday coming. I forget what the actual topic is there, but head across to the official Eve Echoes Discord. There is an AMA channel there that you can jump to, and you can see what's going on and see like how you can get involved in that. Ask your questions. There's going to be 2 time zones. There's one that's fairly early morning. It's before I wake up, and then there's one in the afternoon. My time, at least, I think it's 1100 UTC was the second one. So you should be able to join in with at least one of those. If not, get someone else to ask the questions for you. Hopefully the developers answer. I'll do another video like this. And remember, if you've enjoyed this video but want to get a bit more of my personal thoughts and opinions on some of the topics raised, let me know in the comment section down below. I might do a highlights of the AMA video where we just go over all the really cool bits and sort of group it all together rather than this back and forth jumping I've done. Anyway, folks, let me know your thoughts and opinions on the changes proposed and how this is all coming together. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in